Okay, way back in the Jesus movement, back in the late 60s, early 70s, one of the characteristics of the Jesus movement was that the young hippie Christians decided to incorporate rock and roll music into their worship, right? And so out of the Jesus movement came some Christian bands like Phil Keaggy and Larry Norman and Randy Stonehill and Love Song out of the Calvary Chapel movement, Calvary Chapel Boys. And also there was this group called the Second Chapter of Acts. And it was, I think, two sisters and a brother. They were real cute, innocent as could be. And I don't remember that their songs were absolutely great, but they were progressive, a little folksy, great harmony, whatever. But they called themselves the Second Chapter of Acts. And we just went over the first part of the second chapter of Acts. And something really striking came to my mind. You see this here? Now, verse 6. Now, when this sound occurs, the multitude came together and was confused before each one hears them speaking in his own vernacular. In other words, they started speaking in tongues. And I put the note down here. Is this the opposite of the Tower of Babel? Okay. They were all speaking in languages. Let's see. Now they each heard them speaking. Where are we? When the sound occurs, they each heard them speaking in their own vernacular. They were speaking in tongues, according to how the King James translates it. Okay. Now, my point in doing a follow-up for today's video is, look here. The Tower of Babel has always kind of fascinated me as to what exactly was going on with the Tower of Babel, but here's a couple of things we can learn from it. Number one, the Tower of Babel, to me, is the ultimate in man glorifying himself. Now, I've argued that free willers are the ultimate in glorifying themselves because they worship themselves in their own free will, and they don't worship God, and they don't know anything about the sovereignty of God. They keep arguing that you have a free will and you can choose to be a Christian or not. It's up to you. And if you make the wrong choice, you're going to hell. And so that's, kind of the ultimate in self-worship. And the Tower of Babel is a big story about man's self-worship. They're going to build this tower up to the heavens, maybe inferring that they're not going to get caught with a Noah's flood ever again. Anyway, so we see in this Tower of Babel story, we see that man, his grandest designs come to be destroyed on a regular basis. In the story of the Tower of Babel, God came down as they were building the tower and confused the languages so that nobody knew what the other person was saying, so they couldn't finish building the tower. And it was the providence of God who pulled this off to show humanity, Nimrod and his gang, that, that they can be brought down a peg or two. And I've often made the joke that what languages were they speaking at the Tower of Babel that was so confusing? It was the languages of what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Why should I continue working? Maybe I'll join the union. I'll show you. We'll sue. We'll have a strike. So it's kind of a joke, right? but in the story of the Tower of Babel, they started this building project after Noah's flood, implying that they're going to not get caught up by the flood ever again. So maybe that's their answer to Noah's Ark. Maybe that's mankind's answer to Noah's Ark. But when man sets out to glorify himself and make these great plans, man, it's like the world is run by F Troop. If you ever saw the TV show F Troop from the 60s, Captain Palmer always felt and believed that he was running F Troop, but it was actually run by his little underlings who were running whiskey out the back door and stealing the company payroll, the military payroll, and doing side deals with the Indians. It was just it was a comedy show, but it showed that it was just a nightmarish mess all the time, chaos and confusion. That's what the story of the Tower of Babel is chaos and confusion. However, we come over to the second chapter of Acts, and I'm not talking about that Christian rock band from the 70s. We come over here and we see that all the visitors to Jerusalem heard, they came from all over the country, and they were Parthians and Medes and Elamites, and they were from all over the country, all over the world, the known world at that time. And yet the 120 disciples of Christ who were gathered up in the upper chamber, they started seeing this miracle of them speaking in tongues. And I think this is the kind of the opposite miracle of the Tower of Babel miracle, where God confused their languages. Here he brought the languages all together so that everybody heard them speaking in their own language. And what were they saying? We are hearing them speak in these languages of ours, of the great things of God. So, I don't know that I can really make a whole doctrine out of this thought that this Acts chapter 2 is actually a reverse of the experience of the Babylonian Empire coming to its knees. But it's an interesting thought that God can do anything. Is his arm so short that he cannot save? Can God save the entire of his creation? Will every knee bow? Will every tongue confess? Can God make it so that hell is just a big echo chamber? There's nobody there? A big vacancy spot? Of course, because Christ died and conquered death, and death is the real wages of sin. Hell is not the wages of sin, it's death is the wages of sin. So these cats in the second chapter of Acts were tourists in Jerusalem. They all had a different language because they were from different parts of the country, and they heard the disciples speaking in their own language of the great things of God. Anyway, it's an interesting thought, and I just wanted to share it with you because I like interesting thoughts. And I like the idea that God can do anything. He can reverse the Tower of Babel disaster into building something absolutely wonderful of the Spirit. Okay, grace to you. Talk to you later. Amen.